Hi, thank you for watching this recording of Microsoft 365 Groups Overview and Roadmap. My name is Venkat Ayadevara, and I'm the Group Program Manager for Microsoft 365 Groups. And that means I own the product direction, the roadmap, and delivering on the roadmap for you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike McLean. I'm a Principal Program Manager on the Microsoft 365 Groups team. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you about our roadmap and provide some updates on new scenarios we've enabled across the platform.
Thank you, Mike. So let's get to the agenda. This is, by the way, an update we do once a year where we want to share with you all, our partners and our customers, on what we've been doing with Microsoft 365 Groups, the direction we're taking it, and also a little bit of an explanation of what groups are for those of you who are not familiar with this topic. And then, of course, the meat of this recording is the recent innovations in this space. And at the end of it, everybody wants to, of course, know what's lying in the future. So we want to share with your future roadmap. And this is a what's called a level 200 recording in Microsoft. So it's an intro overview. And at the end of it, we will share with you links to a number of other recordings which go very deep into specific topics. And after this overview, highly encourage you to go watch those recordings as well. And so with that brief description of the agenda, let's get to the first section, the overview. If you look at Microsoft 365 groups, what they really are is a way for a user to define their set of people they work with, be it a temporary project team, it could be a manager and their direct reports, it could be a large community, an organization-wide community on Yammer, but all of it underneath the covers, really a group is created and the membership of the group and the identity, the user gets to access and take advantage of it anywhere in the Microsoft 365 suite. So that's the value to the user. You define it once and you use it everywhere. For the admin, the value is there are many, many different applications in the suite and also many non-Microsoft apps as well, which leverage the power of groups. For the IT administrator, it's a single place where they can apply policies to make sure that all of the interactions and the collaboration are compliant with their organization's best practices. And the four core capabilities which help deliver this promise to both users and IT administrators is number one, provide a space where people can work together, whether they communicate using email or chat, a common calendar, a place to store their documents. The second is no matter how they choose to communicate among each other using group-backed experiences, these are secure, they are compliant. So for example, if users in Europe are collaborating with each other, we can make sure that the group and the data stored associated with the group is also in Europe. The third, a value both for end users and for admins, is we make it possible so these groups are created very easily, but they don't add to clutter. And unused groups expire if you apply something called an expiration policy. And for users themselves, when they create, they do all of the resources associated with their permission so that from day one, people in the team can be productive. And fourth, and maybe the most important, what we have seen is a huge increase in user activity, user engagement, with COVID-19 forcing everybody to work or many people to work from remotely from home. And that has caused a huge surge in activity, both in groups and group-backed experiences, especially in Microsoft Teams. And for IT administrators, not only do they have to support this huge spike in usage and the variety of scenarios they have to accommodate and support, but they also have to do it while taking care of their own family at home. And so what we have done is we have focused on enabling self-service capabilities so that an administrator can safely delegate group management to users who happen to own these groups. And so that they are not a bottleneck, they can scale and at the same time take care of their families. And the organization still stays safe because all of these groups are compliant with its policies. So that's a quick description of what Microsoft 365 groups are about. And let's take a quick look at the numbers. So this is usage in roughly the last 12 months. And we're hugely gratified by how you all, our customers and partners, have really gone and engaged and used these experiences backed by groups to make yourselves and your employees and your other users you serve is successful. So for example, starting from the top left, we are seeing almost a 2x growth. So 199.1% to be precise, increase in usage across the group's platform. And not only for what we've traditionally used groups platform for, which is commercial and educational scenarios, but we also saw a 180% increase in just a single month when users used this during early stages of COVID-19 to stay in touch with their family and friends. And the reason I called out family and friends in red is there's a teaser there. So far, we have always powered experiences backed by groups for commercial and educational scenarios. But now, as we will explain more later, we're also starting to power scenarios outside of work. The third thing I wanted to point out, which is in the top right, is a lot of this work which is happening, and that applies to collaboration as well, is not within the walls of an organization. Often it crosses the organizational boundary. And that it shows up in our stats as well, as more than 7.5 million guests are active through Microsoft 365 groups. And the last time we've done this kind of an update for groups, we only talked about the number of guests provisioned, but we decided to go a step further and actually tell you how many of these guests are active. And as you can see, more than 7.5 million of these guests are actively collaborating with organizations they were invited to. When you go to the bottom half of the slide, what we wanted to showcase is a couple of marquee features we've released and how you all are using it. One such feature to help manage groups at scale is called sensitivity labels. The ability for a user to be familiar with just a small collection of labels and pick the right one when they create a group. And all of the policies associated with the label just get applied automatically behind the scenes. And although we're just a couple of months after general availability, we are seeing more than 1,200 organizations use it. And these users in these organizations have created 160,000 groups with sensitivity labels applied. What that means is for each of these groups, the owners, all they had to do was pick a label and not worry about should they invite guests or should they disable guests? Should they make this group public or should they make it private? Those decisions are automatically taken care of by the automatic policy enforcement. And the last stat on the bottom right, 79%. That is the percentage of groups automatically renewed when they were up for expiry because they were active. This is really important because the usage, the number of people using group-backed experiences has gone up, the number of groups has gone up, but at the same time, the percentage of groups being renewed because they're active, people are using it actively, it's got valuable information there, that has gone up as well. And this is important to understand because some of you have told us that they're worried about what they call group sprawl. Oh, I'm seeing a lot of groups. Am I just accumulating junk? Are they like just dead? I have to go clean up later. And we're finding that's not the case because initially when expiry policies are rolled out, there's a massive culling of unused groups. But after that, it's steady state. 79% of these groups remain active, which means they are valuable to you and your organization. So that's an overview of how you all have been using it. And I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for leveraging groups in this way to make yourselves successfully accomplish whatever it is you have set out to do. And it's also humbling, and we take this responsibility to keep increasing the scale of this platform and also make sure that we make it more and more powerful so that you can continue to succeed and also advance and all, start to use it in a variety of richer ways. So we just talked about how you all have been using the groups platform. But when you look at the last 12 months, they're really in the context of a 3-year journey the platform has been undertaking. Back in 2019, it was all about evolving this platform so that 22 plus Microsoft 365 suite apps and also other non-Microsoft apps can actually leverage the power of the platform and light up experiences for you. 2020 is about two things. One, as I said, we are seeing usage go up in a really healthy fashion. And we want to make sure with the increased usage that you are still able to govern at scale. And the second is, I briefly alluded to it, but we have extended the use of groups platform from work and educational settings to also be used outside of work with friends and family. And that is something we'll talk about in more detail. So that's the focus for 2020. And when we look ahead at 2021, our aspiration is to grow the platform to where it's rich, it's performant, and flexible enough that you can use groups to mimic any real world organization structure which you use, because it's not just about flat membership. You may want hierarchical groups, you may want a hub and spoke kind of organization, and so we want to support that. Second, today the group's membership roles are fairly limited. You're either an owner, a member, or a guest. But the variety of roles people play are so unique, and all of them have unique value, and we want to celebrate that. If you're in a hospital, you could be a pharmacist, a physician, a nurse practitioner, somebody who works in the billing department. And we want to make it possible for you to really define these roles and give them unique privileges so that you can really make the groups platform serve the unique needs you have for your own organization. So that's the 3-year journey. Now, the rest of this recording is going to focus on what is it that we're going to deliver to you in the year 2020. One specific topic I wanted to touch on is this groups platform for your whole day. Like I said before, if you look on the left side, that is where our focus had been largely before, which is in the workplace for collaboration and fostering the same thing in educational institutions. But starting this year, users are taking advantage of applications built on top of this platform to also connect with their families, stay organized, celebrate events such as a birthday party, or be active members of their community, whether they participate in a soccer league or they sing in a church choir, they're doing activism, whatever it be. And so when we look at what is it that we are doing to serve your needs, we see our mission as powering applications which either Microsoft or our partners build to bring together people and all the resources they need so that they can go and accomplish whatever it is they want to do. Sometimes it's an objective, something to get done. Sometimes it's just to foster a sense of belonging. But no matter what it is, we want you to be able to take advantage of this group's platform. But to do this, we had to take a look at architecture because in the end, the rubber meets the road when you actually look at the system. What I'm showing you here is the architecture we've had for a while. You see at the bottom, Azure Active Directory. That's where all our groups for commercial education are mastered, and they're used in a variety of ways. At the top, there are applications such as Teams and Yammer and Outlook, which provide collaboration spaces. And people come together, connect with each other, or they get work done. On the left-hand side, you see users are able to share information or solicit feedback from the same group of people. So there's a sharing notion. And on the right-hand side, we have a vibrant ecosystem where our partners have leveraged both Microsoft Craft and the Power Apps platform to build custom groups management solutions, or sometimes offer their own collab spaces, collaboration spaces, which use this group identity and membership mastered in AAD. And what we did was to extend it to work outside of work, we added another dimension. Now you can also have groups which are outside of work, mastered in the Microsoft account service. And these same set of apps, some of them Outlook and Teams, allow you to stay in touch with your family and friends or communities you're part of, social and professional groups, using these groups. We also have a new family safety app. In today's world where education has gone remote and our kids are spending a lot more time on the screen, a lot more time online, this has become a critical need. And the Family Safety app leverages groups underneath the covers to fulfill that need. And of course, just like in the commercial space, you can use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, you can share information in there, or you can coordinate schedules, let's say, with the people in your group, even when it's outside of work. Now, if you're running, IT administrator in an organization, wondering, okay, how does this help me? Here's how it helps you. Whereas we have tried to extend these use cases outside of work, we have had to make massive investments in simplicity, ease of onboarding, ease of managing membership, performance, the experiences on a phone, and can we make sure the platform supports a really delightful experience? And all of those investments, all of that work accrues to the commercial users as well. So every time we make an improvement to go help solve a problem or a scenario or a need outside of work, all of those investments help deliver a better experience for you and your users, whether you're in a work setting or an educational setting. So that is the reason we're really excited about this enhancement of the platform to serve multiple needs. So I talked a lot about the extension to these new scenarios and why you should be using groups. But every time we do this update, we like to present a report card. At the last Ignite in 2019, this was back in November 2019, we promised you all that we will get a set of features out to you, capabilities out to you. And just for at least I wanted to report back to you how we have done against that promise. Now, a lot of these were announced as individual items, but I'm sure you're all super busy and may have missed these. So we just want to recap this. The first is, as you see in the slide, we have rebranded Office 365 groups as Microsoft 365 groups. This is both a recognition of the coverage of additional use cases across work and life, and also aligned with the fact that a lot of you now are using Microsoft 365 Suite, not just Office 365. And when you look at the individual items, plus the sensitivity labels, or what we also call Microsoft information protection labels, is generally available. We've got some capabilities, additional capabilities for groups administrator role. The biggest one there is the ability to assign that role to a group of people so that you don't have to individually keep track of who all in your IT organization can go group management. Actually, you can have a group and it makes it much easier to keep track of that. And we continue to invest in Microsoft 365 Admin Center to make sure that that is the go-to place to manage our groups. And you will see we're continuing to do that in the coming years as well. An effort which has taken multiple years, has now been private preview, is dynamic groups at scale. This one is really exciting, as Mike will touch on later, because it will allow you to work with much larger set of group of people in your organization and also be much more responsive to the needs of those people. In terms of new value, one I'm personally excited about is information barriers, because it lets you support scenarios such as an ethical wall in a financial institution between a trader and analyst for the same stock. That will be in private preview by the end of this year. And Yammer now supports Microsoft 365 native mode. What that means is when configured in that mode, it behaves just like any other app in the suite. And every community in Yammer is connected to Microsoft 365 groups, and therefore gets all of the richness, the power, and the ease of administration which comes with that. And finally, you have always told us how much you need group-driven membership so that you can easily model larger groups, delegate administration to parts of the groups where having a flat list of 10,000 people doesn't really work, or even 100, beyond 100 doesn't work. And while we haven't completed that, we have started to make progress. We have a 3-phase plan. And the first phase is going to be out as an open source tool to help manage large groups used for exec town halls or exec connection. And Mike will touch on that as well. And so with that, we're done with the overview section, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike to talk through all of the recent exciting investments and innovations we made in the space. Take it away, Mike.
Thanks, Venkat. Great. Now we'll spend some more time diving into a little more detail about some of these new enhancements that we've delivered to the Microsoft 365 Groups platform. Obviously, there's been a ton of innovation across the platform. This slide highlights some of the recent innovations that we've shipped and some new scenarios that we've enabled. We've tried to classify these new enhancements into 3 primary buckets. On the left side, we have a set of enhancements that are focused on the governance of Microsoft 365 groups. These are enhancements that improve how groups are managed across the organization. In the center column, we have a classification of enhancements focused on managing groups at scale. This targets both managing large volumes of groups as well as managing groups with large volumes of members. And then on the third column, we have a set of enhancements that are primarily focused on those new scenarios that we've enabled across work and life. So when we look at the governance enhancements that we've enabled across Microsoft 365 groups. We're really excited that we've shipped information protection labels to general availability. We onboarded over 1,000 customers during our preview programs, and now all of our customers can take advantage of the new sensitivity labels to drive various behaviors in Microsoft 365 groups. We're very close to enabling a preview for information barriers, like Venkat just mentioned. This will help our customers manage at a slightly more granular level which individuals are allowed to collaborate within a Microsoft 365 group. There's been a ton of enhancements across the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, and there are many recordings that go into a lot of detail around the new scenarios that have been enabled in terms of managing users, groups, and licenses across Microsoft 365. And the Microsoft 365 Admin Center now supports scenarios like the ability to export your full list of groups directly from the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. And we know that as organizations start to collaborate with other companies, in the past, it was very easy for them to create an internal account and give that to a user outside of their organization. This allowed them to start collaborating very quickly on documents and chat and other scenarios. As our guest framework through Azure B2B has matured over the years, a lot of our customers are realizing that that is a better way to invite an external user. They're able to build guest reattestation policies and validate that those guests only have access to certain resources for a specific period of time. So Azure Active Directory has now shipped the ability to convert those internal users to true Azure B2B guests. And lastly, from a governance perspective, we're investing quite a bit in how to proactively manage ownerless groups across Microsoft 365. When we look at how we're improving managing groups at scale, there's been a lot of innovation across Azure Active Directory in terms of how groups are constructed with dynamic membership rules, along with how those groups are managed at scale. When groups are created using dynamic membership rules, they would traditionally take an amount of time that's relative to the entire size of the org, and now they will actually execute much quicker, and we can support groups of much higher volume. There's also user experience improvements that have been put in place that help our admins validate the rules that are being placed inside those dynamic membership groups. And when we look at the different first-party apps that have integrated across the Microsoft 365 Groups platform, a lot of them are integrating in deeper and more different ways. If you take Yammer as an example, Yammer is now shipped native mode, which treats every community like a Microsoft 365 group, which means all these communities can take advantage of all the great naming policies and expiry lifecycle that have been being put in place across the platform. When we look at the Microsoft 365 Groups platform in general, there are a lot of enhancements that were needed to our APIs to make our partners more successful, and we'll talk about those in a minute, along with the ability to assign roles to a group so our admins can manage who actually has access to perform certain actions at scale. Now, when we look at all the great benefits that we've been able to provide from the Microsoft 365 Groups platform to our enterprise users, we spent a lot of time thinking about how that can be extended into life. And so you'll notice that we have rebranded the platform to reflect Microsoft 365 Groups, which really is the true identity of the platform. It integrates to more than 22 first-party apps across Microsoft 365. And like Venkat described, we've now enabled new scenarios like groups in Outlook.com. This allows users to get started quickly in their personal life if they need to collaborate via mail or calendar for a social group or within their own personal family. And when you look across the suite, we really tried to drive a lot of coherence in terms of how groups are created. That's why now when you create a group through Outlook and then you create a group through Microsoft Stream, that'll have a very similar look and feel. So when we look at the platform in general, like I mentioned, there were several requests we had from our third-party partners that would improve their ability to construct solutions and apps on top of Microsoft 365 Groups. And so the first enhancement that we released this year was focused on how licenses are required to modify certain properties. Typically, if an admin needed to modify a property on a Microsoft 365 group that controlled how mail was delivered to that group, or perhaps who was allowed to email that group, they had to be assigned an Exchange license. This consumed one of their licenses, And sometimes it's very difficult to track who is assigned what type of licenses based on the properties that are attached to the group. So we've removed that license restriction, and now an admin can come into any of the admin centers and modify any of those Exchange properties without being assigned a license in Exchange. Second, we enabled a couple of new properties in Microsoft Graph. We shipped the hide from Outlook clients property along with the hide from address list property. These provide our customers and partners more flexibility in terms of how they show and hide groups across the ecosystem. Now, if you're a partner or a customer, you can build a custom app that can set this value, and now your users can decide whether they want to interact with that group in Outlook, Teams, or both. When we talk to a lot of our admins, we get a lot of feedback in terms of trying to provide more insights into where groups are created. From an admin perspective, it's very important to know if they're seeing a surge of group creation from a particular endpoint. This helps them identify if they're going to be seeing a lot of group creation through SharePoint team sites, Microsoft Planner, Outlook, Teams, or Yammer. What we've enabled over the past year is a new property on the group object called created by app ID. This property will be populated with the ID of the application that is used to create the Microsoft 365 group. This supports all first and third party partners with registered app IDs, and an admin can take that ID and quickly reference the service principals to report exactly which app created that group. Lastly, we invested quite a bit in supporting application authentication for our Conversations APIs and Microsoft 365 groups. Traditionally, if a customer or partner wanted to build an application that read conversations or made updates, they would have to run that app in the context of a user. It's not a very flexible approach. Now they can actually run that in the context of their app. So it's a much more robust solution, and we support the group.read-write-all and group.read-all permissions. We do have public-facing documentation that's been updated for all these, so I encourage you to go out there and take a look. Now, when we step back and think about managing those groups at scale, like I mentioned previously, there's been a lot of enhancements in terms of how groups powered by dynamic membership rules are processed. It's very difficult to manage a 10,000 person group with a flat list. That's why a lot of our admins will create dynamic membership rules to ensure that all the members in the group meet a certain criteria. This can automatically pull in users based on their location or their title, and then it can remove users if they no longer fit that criteria. In the past, there's been some challenges around using dynamic membership rules. One challenge was that if you had a very large tenant, let's say you had 100 or 200,000 users in your tenant, the time it took to process one of these groups would be relative to the size of the entire tenant. So if you had a 10,000 person group, it would still take quite a while, hours, maybe even a day. What we've done is remove that restriction. So now the time it takes to process your group is actually relative to the size of the group itself. That means those smaller groups will process much quicker. Additionally, the SLA is improved, so instead of taking hours, we're looking at updating these groups in a matter of minutes now. From a reliability perspective, in the past, if a customer was syncing data from on-premises to the cloud or syncing data down from Azure, occasionally there would be some object failures in the sync stream that need to be investigated, and these could potentially block the processing of those dynamic membership rules. So we've actually been able to work past that, and now those single object failures will not block processing of additional groups powered by dynamic membership rules. And when you look at the scalability of the solution, we've had challenges in the past meeting some of the needs for certain market segments. When you look at education, oftentimes they'd like to create a group that includes everyone in their school or university. This was very difficult when some schools have tens of thousands of students. So in the past, a dynamic membership group would cap out at maybe 5,000 or 10,000 members. And so we've been able to push past that, and we'll show in a demo today a group that actually has up to 100,000 members. Great, so with that, I think now we'll take a look at some of these scenarios directly in the product. Great, we'll start our Microsoft 365 groups demos in one of our first party apps called Yammer. Yammer has done a great job incorporating customer feedback to deliver a rich solution that connects leaders and employees across the company. Yammer has also done a great job integrating more deeply to the Microsoft 365 groups platform. When Yammer's first provisioned, the initial community created is called All Company. Now, one of the benefits Yammer receives from integrating more deeply to the Microsoft 365 Groups platform is that all of these communities get to take advantage of all the great benefits of Microsoft 365 Groups. That means this community called All Company is now backed by a Microsoft 365 group. When I take a look at Azure Active Directory, I have All Company here, and you can see it's now a Microsoft 365 group. I can look at the full list of members, and I have links to the resources that were provisioned. That means that when I'm interacting with this community as a community manager, I can now take advantage of all the benefits that Yammer is delivering by integrating to the Microsoft 365 Groups platform. One question we get frequently is the ability to rename All Company. Our customers want to leverage their true brand and their true identity and use it as a place for their employees to connect and ask questions. Now with All Company, I can navigate into the settings and I could rename this community to reference All Contoso employees. So now I've been able to rename my community. In addition to renaming the community, I can take advantage of a feature called posting permissions. So down here, as a community manager, I can actually control who has the ability to start new conversations. Here, I'll ensure that only admins can start new conversations, but anybody else can reply and start participating. So now I can kick off a new post and say, please post your questions for the all hands here. And all my employees can start responding and interacting using this community. Like I said, it now reflects the true brand of our company. And when I look back in Azure Active Directory, you'll see the Microsoft 365 group has been renamed to reflect All Contoso employees. This is one example of how our first-party apps have benefited from deeper integration to the Microsoft 365 Groups platform. So staying with Azure Active Directory for just a minute, I mentioned earlier that there's been a ton of enhancements in terms of how groups powered by dynamic membership rules are executed. Here, I have a group in Azure Active Directory that includes a simple set of rules that will include anyone whose country equals Canada. As an admin, typically I would deploy this group. I'd have to wait 4 hours for the rules to process, and then I could determine whether or not I had to make any modifications to the rules. Using the new Validate Rules preview, I can include a set of users. Here I can pull in Adele, Alex, Alan, Bianca, and I can run these rules and get some immediate feedback on whether or not my rule is correct. So here it's going to communicate to me Adele would not be included because she has a different country specified, but a user like Bianca would meet the criteria because she's based in Canada, and so she would be included in my Microsoft 365 group. So this helps make our IT admins' lives just a little bit easier. Now, if I navigate up and take a look at the properties of this group, you'll see it's powered by dynamic membership rules. And when I scroll down, this group is actually comprised of 109,000 members. So this just demonstrates the sheer size of groups that we're working with. Now, when I look at my collection of groups in Azure Active Directory, we're really excited to announce that you can now assign any Azure AD roles to a Microsoft 365 group. So here I have a group called All Groups Administrators. And what I've done is assigned the group's administrator role to this Microsoft 365 group. I have access to all the various roles across Azure AD. If I wanted to, I could also pull in any role related to Microsoft Teams, Power BI, or anything available inside Azure. When I add members to this group, each one of these members will now inherit this role. So they'll be treated as if they were explicitly assigned the group's administrator role. Now, if I take Adele as an example, I can click the assigned roles, and I can see that Adele is now assigned the group's administrator role. So this will be handled exactly as if she was explicitly assigned the group's administrator role. If Adele navigates over to an experience like the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, Adele now has the ability to navigate into a Microsoft 365 group. She can see the full list of members. If she clicks View All and Manage Members, here she can bring in Alan and make him a member of the Microsoft 365 group. So she has all the same powers as if she was assigned the role directly. So you can see here that assigning an Azure AD role to a Microsoft 365 group will really help our IT admins operate a little more efficiently. Now they could even delegate the management of that role and who has access to perform that role across the system. So when we talk now about managing very large groups at scale, like we mentioned earlier, we have heard a lot of feedback from our customers that they are very interested in taking one group and using that to drive membership in another group. That's why we've designed a three-phase approach to introduce what we call group-driven membership. The first phase includes a tool that will be available for download that you can deploy inside your organization. There are a few different components of this tool. First, there's a PowerShell script that will define exactly which groups are used as an input, and it'll define the group that's used as a target to which we're going to populate membership. Now, when I zoom in here, you'll be able to see I have a few different security groups that are being defined in my PowerShell script. And then I have a target group right here, which is the Microsoft 365 group that's going to be populated with the membership from these security groups. Now, the second component that will be available is a job that's going to run in Azure that's actually going to extract the membership from the security groups and populate it into the Microsoft 365 group. When that runs, we're going to extract the membership from those three security groups we just saw in that PowerShell script. Here, these are the exact same groups. If we take a look at each of these groups, they can be made up of explicit members that have been assigned to this group, or these can even be made up of another set of groups. So we support importing security groups that potentially have a nested structure. That job that's running in Azure will populate the all hands Microsoft 365 group right here. So here's an example of the job that's going to be running in Azure. And when I kick this off and wait for this to run, what it's going to do is it's going to start extracting all of the members from that security group, and it's going to populate the membership in my Microsoft 365 group. So here you can see I have about 2,000 members right here. So this is now comprised of each of those three security groups, which included my executives and all of the other members across the region. And as new members join those security groups or existing members leave, they'll be added or they'll be removed from this Microsoft 365 group. So this is the first step in terms of providing a solution that actually allows our customers to take groups that represent their existing org hierarchy and drive membership in a Microsoft 365 group. The last scenario we'll focus on is a feature that's been requested from a number of customers. Our customers want to enforce more granular control around who is allowed to collaborate inside a Microsoft 365 group. Quite frequently, there are scenarios where individuals from one side of the business really shouldn't be communicating with individuals from another side of the business. This might involve traders and analysts, or perhaps individuals who are defining policies with customers in similar market segments. And so what we've done in the Microsoft 365 Groups platform is introduce a new property called the info catalog. This allows our customers to define a segment that is attached to a Microsoft 365 group. At that point, if they have segments also attached to user objects, the Microsoft 365 group will only include users that have compatible segments. So here, when I take a look at the properties for this Microsoft 365 group, you'll see down here we have a new property called info catalogs. So this particular Microsoft 365 group has this specific info catalog segment, and it will only accept users that have compatible segments. When I look at the list of users in Azure Active Directory, I have a user named Arun, and he is allowed to collaborate with Alan, but he has an incompatible segment with a user like Vinay. So they really should not be collaborating in the same Microsoft 365 group. Now, what happens in a workload like SharePoint is that when Arun comes into SharePoint and attempts to add Vinay, we will actually be checking the segment that's associated with this Microsoft 365 group. And you can see here, Vinay's name will not resolve. That means Arun cannot add Vinay to this Microsoft 365 group. However, if he types Alan's name, you can see Alan resolves, and he is able to add Alan to this Microsoft 365 group. So this is a quick example of the new information barrier feature that we'll be launching to private preview soon that provides more granular control around who is allowed and who is prevented from collaborating inside the Microsoft 365 group. What we just took a look at was how our first-party applications like Yammer have integrated more deeply to the Microsoft 365 Groups platform. We also saw some of the new investments in how dynamic membership rules are constructed and executed to support large Microsoft 365 groups. There are new features like assigning Azure AD roles to Microsoft 365 groups. And we also looked at the first stage of introducing a solution that's going to support group-driven membership. Lastly, we took a look at how information barriers will be enabled in Microsoft 365 groups to provide that more granular control. To speak a little bit about our future roadmap and where things are going with the Microsoft 365 groups platform, I'm going to hand it back to Venkat.
Thank you, Mike. That was an excellent set of demos. And now let's talk a little bit about the future roadmap. This shows kind of the list of things which are either close to shipping, maybe work in progress, or things we've got planned a few months out. The first one is, as I spoke before, we are rebranding Microsoft 365 to Microsoft 365 Groups from Office 365 Groups. And over the coming few months, you will see this new brand reflected in all of the app experiences in the Microsoft 365 suite. The second is, first, we're going to quickly make information barriers available in private preview by the end of this year. But then, of course, we want to take all of your feedback, your input, and then take it to general availability. The same applies to dynamic groups at scale as well. It's in preview today, and we already have customers trying this out. And again, we'll use the inputs and feedback to take it to general availability. And Yammer is already in private preview for Azure B2B guest support. So it's consistent with guest governance for Teams and other apps in the suite. That's in preview again, and we'll go to general availability. And that brings up an important point, even before I go through the other items, which is a lot of these items were prioritized or picked based on your inputs. Also, to go from private preview to general availability, a number of you have tried out these or usually try out in the previews and give us valuable inputs, which we end up using to make the product better for all of you. So please keep sending us those ideas. And also let us know for any of these features, whatever stage of development they're in, if you're interested in talking to us to either give us requirements, help provide feedback during previews, or general feedback even post general availability. Continuing down the list, group ownership governance. Mike touched on this again briefly, but for ownership and management and self-service management of groups to scale, IT admins have to be able to hold the owners of the groups, who tend to be end users, accountable for the membership of the group and all of the interactions within the group. That model breaks down when a group has owners, and let's say it has two owners and both those owners leave the organization. Suddenly it's ownerless. There's nobody to hold accountable, and there's nobody to take care of, let's say, membership group join requests. So what we're doing is we want to address this pain point for our IT admin folks by providing both reporting and automatic remediation of groups which are currently ownerless, and to also detect, identify, and remediate single owner groups because eventually they would be at risk of going ownerless. So that's a big effort which we are currently in the midst of development. The next one is, as I said before, for us, Microsoft 365 Admin Center will be the go-to place for group administration. Of course, every service like SharePoint or Yammer will have specific settings specific to that experience and that workload. But the main overall administration, we would love to get all admins to be able to just do that from a single place, which is Microsoft 365 Admin Center. And so we have a steady set of improvements there. Mike touched on how to enable easy management of groups for exec town halls with this downloadable tool. We are looking to make it open source by the end of the year. But that solves one set of scenarios, whether those groups are coming from Active Directory or maybe you're pulling membership from some of the line of business application you have in your organization. But we want to expand the set of groups which support nested membership by taking the power of dynamic membership and the scale enhancements we have made and give IT admins a way to set up groups using dynamic membership rules such as member off, and therefore have nested memberships and light up scenarios where maybe a group manager or a division level vice president, their staff is able to set up groups, which again, subgroups of it can be managed by independent subunits of that division. And the last is we talked about how we've started now enabling scenarios in our applications where the power of groups can be leveraged outside of work and at homes and communities. We're just getting started there. So we have a number of different features and capabilities planned there. And most of those accrue to users of group-backed experiences in commercial and educational settings as well. So that's an overview of the roadmap. And I also wanted to remind you all, this recording is an overview session, but our team has recorded a number of videos. You see the topics bolded in the table here. And these are specific to topics related to Microsoft 365 groups. And the larger table is about a variety of different areas you may be interested if you are administering your Microsoft 365 tenant for your organization. And so this is the end of the recording. And with that, I just want to say thank you for watching this recording. Hopefully you found it engaging and informative. And we would love for you, once again, to use the resources here to learn about what we're offering, stay up to date with the roadmap, and most importantly, give us feedback on things which are missing, things you would like to see, places where you would like to collaborate with us to shape the design or the form of the different capabilities we are rolling out. And also, as we make them available, feedback on how these features are working out for you. And to be able to do this, once again, our information is posted here. We're available both on email and on Twitter. So please keep the awesome inputs coming. Thank you.